You are about to receive messages that may be harmful to your mental state. Your sense of reality will be questioned. Your view on things will be altered. You are now part of the meta. The meta controls everything. The meta determines what will and will not happen. You are watching the Meta Show.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the first episode of the Meta Show in the EVE third decade, starting in 2020. I'm your host, Briss Ball. I'm here joined by the man whose name is used to scare little children in Iceland to make them eat their peas, the Matani.
Thanks for having me, and it's good to be back, guys. We took a couple weeks off for the holidays, and Brisk and I had an entire discussion about this when we were looking at what we were going to be doing with the show over the last couple of weeks, and we essentially came to the conclusion that if we can't do a good show, like if it's going to be stressful or rushed, or there's not anything going on, or it's going to be dodgy due to holidays or events or what have you, that we would, instead of having substitutes on or things like that, just do nothing. Like if we're unable to do a proper meta show, we're just going to not do one. And hopefully people are cool with that. I hope that you guys appreciate that we're not always going to have one, but we're going to aim to have quality over quantity. And Brisk, what do we got? What's going on in your world?
Well, the first thing we're going to do today is we're going to bring on two guests, Progod legend of Test Alliance, Please Ignore, and we're going to bring on Suitonia of Volta. And both of these gentlemen are former CSMs. They're also very clued in as to what's going on. We're going to talk a little bit about what we think, what we're calling our 2020 year-in preview. All of the shows last week and the week before did year-in review or decade-in review shows, and we're a forward-looking program. We're not a backward-looking program. We want to see what we think is going to happen this year. So we're going to talk to these guys and find out what they think we're going to see from CCP and what we're going to see in Nullsec and elsewhere in the game in 2020. Then we're going to talk about what everyone has been calling the Impeachment War, which is slowly but surely starting in Nullsec between Test and Deadco, with others, including my own alliance, the Initiative, being involved. And then we're going to go and just talk about some other stuff that CCP's been doing and give a couple of attaboys for some of the stuff that they did over the Christmas time period. So with that, let's get started, and we're going to go with our top story of the day. Gentlemen, Progod, Suitonia, welcome to the show. It's good to have you guys back.
What's up?
Nice to be here.
Indeed.
So,
Well,
go ahead and kick it off.
You go.
No,
I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. So yeah, I was actually going to do the obligatory. So for people that don't necessarily know who Progod Legend is or who Suitonia is, if each of you guys, Progod first, could introduce yourselves and tell our viewers a little bit about yourselves and what you do in EVE Online.
Yeah. Progod, I fleet command for Test. I used to fleet command for Nelly. Used to be on the CSM. That's pretty much it.
Suitonia?
Yeah, I also used to be on the CSM. I guess I'm most known for flying frigates and generally making content for like solo and small gang PvP on YouTube and Twitch.
I think it's safe to say that these two guys are two of the more knowledgeable folks about what's going on in the game and have had experience both in the game as well as behind the scenes with CCP. So we're happy to have you guys here.
And with that, actually, let's dive in. So we do have a bunch of politics-related things that we'll get to later. When it comes to the whole impeachment war thing, Progod is very much front and center in that and is leading that campaign for the forces of Legacy Coalition. But before we get to that point, we're going to do the sort of the 2020 preview. What do we expect to see? What do we think is going to be happening? What would we like to see? And what have people heard through the grapevine from CCP about what may or may not be happening? And to begin with that, I want to throw things over to Suitonia to begin with. What do you think is going to be coming for us in 2020, and what should we expect to see in the near future from what your predictions are?
Yeah, so Vegas CCP Rise, I believe, teased a few things in his presentation. Of those things, we had a wormhole teaser for some changes to wormhole space, as well as factional warfare changes too. I believe we also saw like a few more things that maybe probably won't happen, like ship metaplasmids and space weather effects and things like that. But those are the things that sort of stand out to me as probably things that we're going to see in the next 3 to 6 months. We don't know what those changes would be. I know CCP Rise was also on a podcast called the Less Than 10 podcast, which is like a small gang podcast. And he did mention a few things too about like maybe adding in some more small gang conflict drivers, like reworking the ESS potentially, or adding more reasons for small gangs to exist in Nullsec. Because right now you basically have raw call killing or good fights for honor, etc. But there isn't really anything in between that. And so you kind of just have right now, right, as a small gang, you basically have kill raw calls and kill caps, and, which is kind of like on the higher end stuff, like, mass stealth bombers or, like 60 T3Cs like Volta does. Or you have like good fights in battle cruisers and hope the other side undocks. But then you have Citadel bashes and super fights, but you don't really have anything, you know, on the outskirts of that, right? Like you either have like 60 T3Cs or 100 bombers, or you can't really do too much as a small gang.
Are you talking about like structure objectives, like strategic objectives that are for 10 to 20 people?
No, I don't think they should do that. Like, I think that, the Intosis link has kind of showed that sort of content doesn't exist, which is why I really like CCP Rise, like maybe reworking the ESS mechanics or making there like be more kind of like small gang theft, like things that make smaller groups undock. Because, like, the problem with Intosis, right, is number one, it's either ineffective or it's incredibly frustrating and horrible for alliances, I think. And then number two, like it doesn't get you a fight, right? Like you Intosis something and then you get a fight in 2 days or whatever, but then you're not going to be able to fight them anyway with a small gang because the alliance is going to show up and just hell dunk you because you're taking this off. And you're just frustrating that alliance, right? Like they have to show up to a timer, and it's just kind of bad for them too.
I think your point is solid. I think one of the things that I would like to see CCP work on in the next year is something exactly like that for the middle to small level alliances. There's nothing that's in the game right now, nothing contestable that is sufficiently of value for them to do what they do that will not bring in the big guys to come in and take over anyway. So
Well,
if they can come up with something that's in the middle.
It's very difficult because that's why I asked Suitonia if it was going to be structure of objective base. Because if there's going to be something in the game that is actually, worthwhile and balanced, that is small gang focused, it's going to have to be something that hasn't been thought of before. Because I think a lot of people like to think that they want to go back to like a 2007, 2008 era EVE, where roaming was really constant and people were forming home defense fleets. But I don't think that was a product of the game mechanics. It was just a product of the meta being heavily undeveloped. I mean, now that everyone's figured out capital umbrellas and defense umbrellas and, everyone just red lights as soon as someone comes in the system and they know that if they fight you, you'll just come back. I don't think that you could achieve small game mechanics or small game content on a consistent basis without coming up with something new. And that's reworking ESS mechanics sounds like a good idea. But this idea that, and you weren't saying that, Suitonia, but I know this is popular out there, that nerfing super umbrellas or nerfing, structures in some way is going to lead to more small game content. I just don't see it. I mean, they nerfed Sinos, and just about every major alliance figured out how to just sit recons on the Titan within 2 hours.
One of the questions that I have about this,
hunting,
yeah, I wanna ask Suitonia. We're going to be talking about this much later in the show as in terms of good things. I really like it. In Nullsec, we've gotten a lot of value out of the addition of filaments, which were like a random thing they had in the holidays. And I have a whole thing later in the show about how I think they're great and I'd like to see them be made permanent, blah, blah, blah. But from a small gang perspective, if you're talking about how there's mostly just like rorqual hunting or like fucking nothing otherwise, Suitonia, can you maybe let us know, have the filaments changed the gameplay of like your demographic at all, or are they like, is that a step in the right direction? Do you like them? What's your stance on that? Does that enter into your criticisms?
No, I think the filaments are great, and they actually added like a lot of stuff that was missing. Like the thing is that I don't think it really changed how people like Volta operated because we already have more than 25 people anyway, and the things that Volta do like kill Rookles and kill Caps, and just bring 60 T3Cs to kill Munins if they don't bring supers themselves. That didn't really change our gameplay, but what it did change is I think it also like really helped a lot of the it helped a lot of people get into small gang PvP because like one of the problems with wormholes and being in like a small gang wormhole group, right, is there's so much logistics and effort that you have to put in. Like you have to roll holes, which requires that you have like 4 or 5 dedicated people in battleships rolling. You need like you need probers, you need scouts, you need you need to bring stuff into wormholes, which is difficult in itself because you have to manually travel. There's no jump raiders that you can use in wormhole space that effectively. So just having it so you can just get 5 people together and undock from jitter and just teleport somewhere and just get a fight and die. It's really cool.
Nice. Okay.
Progod, what do you think?
I haven't used the filaments yet. So I'm sure they sound good. I think I don't know. To me, it felt like a little kind of cheesy compared to what Eve is supposed to be, but it's 25 ships and subcaps. It's really not that big of a deal. If
Yeah,
it's fun,
I actually think
if it
it's
keeps people entertained and it's easy content for not much commitment, I'm okay with it.
yeah. One thing that I really like about it too is because you see a lot of people suggest things like PvP arenas and instant PvP fights, which I think I think we all agree would probably be really bad for Eve. I think this is like the best thing that they've come up with in a way where you can get instant kind of content where you get teleported somewhere, you can try and get a fight as soon as possible without having to dedicate a lot of time into roaming or logistics getting ships set up because you can literally just stage from jitter or buy ships, teleport out. So it's still like it's got a great balance, right, of being like instant, but it's still like in the Eve sandbox and like you're actually fighting other people in the world. It's not like one of the things with like World of Warcraft, right, is that there's no world PvP because all of the PvP happens in arenas and battlegrounds, right? And you would never want that to happen to Eve. So
Yeah, for sure. No, I think it is it's a good compromise between instances and still being Eve Online.
Yeah, I think that one of the challenges that we have is that because the soft system is so just inherently unnavigable, that there is no easy way for blocks to get content that isn't essentially at a small scale. In order to recreate the kind of content that we were getting from Filaments, we had to go into Wormhole, set up essentially a revamped version of a SIG and a squad, and come up with an entire system to authorize people to get into an alliance level Wormhole program that could then hopefully maybe find holes in the right places to be able to get that kind of 5 to 25 person content. And so the Filament essentially allows you to skip all of that oversight and administration and work in order to teleport something that isn't strategically relevant, and that's a good thing. Just to get people logged into the game and doing something because it seems to be working.
And to Mid's point, I mean that's really the benefit of the Filaments, I think. And we're going to talk about this later, so I don't want to belabor it too much. But the amount of work that our wormhole crews would put together in order to just get us routes in and out of potential target systems, these guys were putting in days of work trying to map things. And now it's easy. You just take a filament and you hope you get lucky. Now, granted, last night I was on a fleet with Pando and we took one and ended up in 1 DQ, so that didn't help us very much. But every once in a while you land somewhere fun and you get a good fight. We ended up going to Kesh and fighting Brave, but it's just the nature of the beast in that regard. But I want to get back to what we were talking about, at least in the preview of 2020. We talked to Tony what he thought about potentially is going to happen. Progod, what do you think is going to happen? And not just CCP wise, but what do you think from a, you along with Mittens are two of the bigger autocrats. What do you think is going to happen in terms of Nullsec politics? Who's going to fight each other? Are we going to see any wars beyond what's going on right now with you guys and Sort and Deadco? What do you think?
I think for 2020, I can't speak specifically about what wars may or may not happen. I know that Test will continue to conduct ourselves with honor and continue to be good allies to whoever decides to work with us in the future. And we'll always be the good guys in whichever conflict we fight in. So I know that's.
Unless you're killing a Keepstar in Stain, right?
I cannot speak to the Keepstar and Stain. We haven't RF'd it yet.
What do you think is going to happen in terms of CCP stuff? Do you think are we going to see anything that we would like Supercap nerfs and stuff?
I took a break back in April. Actually, I took a break that was longer than the break I took when Nully shut down, and then I joined Test. That was only like 5 months. I took like an 8-month break in April and just came back a few weeks ago. And like just being back for a few weeks, even though I'm getting fights, it's kind of reminding me why I took a break. The mechanics are still like really shaky, and they're so close too. Like the Munin nerf just instantly made Megathrons viable again against Munins. Just adding that Sig and increasing Megathron damage by about 30% against Munins made all the difference. Little tiny changes like that. So Team Talos being there and making consistent changes. This is something we haven't had an Eve like this forever, and since 2012 when they were making like monthly changes in a while. I think the potential is there to finally get the balance to a place where this thing can, the game can really take off and be extremely healthy again, because it doesn't take much. Nerfing bosuns opened up battleship fleets again in certain situations. Nerfing Munins made some fleet comps viable again, and these were just tiny tweaks. Adding that fall off and rate of fire to autocannons and fall off to barrage opened up autocannon Macarials against some doctrines. I don't think people consider how important balance is and how important minor little changes are, and the fact that we have a dedicated team to it means that there's a lot of potential there. But we got to hit Sov, and we got to hit capitals, and until we do, we're going to be stuck in the same place. I don't know how you get there. I've seen good ideas, I've seen bad ideas. I've had some good and bad ideas. I don't know. I personally, I'm on the side of subcaps. I think subcaps are what drives EVE Online. And the sooner we get back to a subcap focused system with capitals as a force multiplier and situational force multiplier, not just a, jack of all trades, utility, win every fight no matter what force multiplier, then we'll be in a good spot. I also think we need some passive income sources to fight over. I really think passive moon income coming back would be a game changer. Especially now that we're in the era of super cap umbrellas or capital umbrellas or whatever it ends up being after the nerfs. Having these major blocks that live in Delve and Esoteria and in Smother and Drone Lands and Declan and Fountain, and then having borderlands in between them like Cloud Ring and Geminate and Ketch and all these places is an interesting dynamic right now, but they don't matter because other than rental income, you can't really make money off of a region if you don't live in it. And rental income's difficult for a borderland where there's actual conflict. So that's why everyone's bluing at each other. It's not because they don't want to fight each other. It's because if you own this space and you want to make money off of it, you have to rent it. And to rent it, you have to make sure no one's constantly roaming it. Now, if you could make money passively off of it through conflict, through moon income or some other passive income source, then I think there would be a lot of border conflict. You would need to be blue with your neighbors because fighting them for moons constantly would actually be beneficial, especially if you could do it in a way where, once a week, this may be a small game content thing too for you, Suitonia. Once a week, the structure produces a loot box or whatever, and whoever picks it up gets it or something like that. I don't know. That could be a bad idea.
The funny thing about this is I agree with all of that, actually. And it's kind of I might be tangenting into theory land here, but in terms of advocacy, we're in kind of a weird place right now, because back in the day when the leadership in the game and the player base as a whole and the CSM would be arguing about the direction of supercapitals and stuff like that, there would be a pro supercap faction, which is usually like the Band of Brothers, the MC guys,
Yeah.
your elite PvP dudes, and then there would be the subcapital anti supercap death to all supercap crew, which has always been Goonswarm and friends. Death to all supercaps, delete them from the game. But right now we're in a place where there really isn't anybody that I have seen loudly defending the current balance of supercapitals. Like, I am in charge of the largest supercapital fleet in the history of the game right now, and I would, I firmly believe that supercapitals are an escalation factor that should be designed to kill capital ships and should not be able to affect subcaps, such that you can't throw supercaps around willy-nilly without having a subcapital force to secure the area for them. And there have been periods in EVE's history where supercapitals have not been very good at affecting subcaps. And whenever we find supercaps being able to skip down the escalation chain and be able to impact not just capital ships below them punching downward, but to punch all the way downward and hurt subcaps, that's when they become oppressive. That's when you see these umbrellas becoming more ridiculous. So it's kind of strange. Like, there isn't, I think that we have actually achieved kind of like a player-based consensus regarding supercapitals. Nobody is saying they need to be buffed. Nobody is saying that they need to be able to blow up subcaps willy-nilly. And hopefully we'll be able to change that. And I also agree with you about the resource depletion. I think that, not resource depletion, I mean the passive income thing. I was a big advocate of getting rid of passive moon mining. I thought that it would be a good thing for the game, for people to live in their space and do all this stuff. And unfortunately, I think I was wrong. I think it is good for people to be active in their space and stuff like that. But at the same time, we really have lost these single point conflict drivers that kept peacetime interesting, as we would like slap fight on our borders about R64s, and that has been lost. So if CCP does end up changing things there, I think that would be fantastic. That's my hope for the future.
Just to show that's, just because we're knowledgeable doesn't mean we can't get some of these things wrong. I when I was on the CSM and they proposed and Tosasov as a new idea, I thought it was fucking amazing. I thought it was the best idea they had in years. Turns out I didn't foresee every single way in which it could be abused. But they show you this idea and they're like, what do you think? And I read it for like 30 seconds and I'm like, God, this sounds good. We'll have fights on multiple grids. That's a great way to get capitals out of the situation. And then, it became what it is.
Yeah.
And then you tried it and you realized it was cancer.
Yeah. It's a hot mess.
So to talk to, I think one of the problems that we're having, and I don't want to bring real life into this, but this is a real life thing. I think we're finally at the point where the meta in Nullsec politics has evolved away from conflict for the sake of conflict, and now it's got to the point of what we saw in the early part of the 20th century. Entirely. Well, I think we got to the point where we're kind of at the point now where people were, I want to say in the beginning of the 20th century, you had a lot of folks in the academic circles who were positing that as we see more democracies being created, we're going to see fewer wars, because democracies don't go to war because they'd rather trade with each other. And I think right now what we're seeing is, at least in Nullsec, exactly what you said, Progod. The big alliances are trying to make money. They're trying to fund their SRP. They're trying to be able to provide reasons for their members to want to stay where they are, which is usually around money making, because that's what most players want when they want to get in one of these big groups. They want to fight, but they also want to have a safe place to make money. And everybody's focused on trying to keep what they have and make what they have profitable, to the point that it's easier to just not fight over something rather than go through the hassle of a massive Entosis war for something that doesn't really generate a lot of income. So I think the big issue, and one of the things I would hope that CCP would address, it's exactly what we just talked about, is, and what we have been talking about, and Matani and I have been talking about on the show for the last month or so, is what makes the big groups go to war? How do we make that more attractive to them so we do that? So it's more attractive to fight than it is to blue everybody up and just rely on rental income. And I think passive income is one way to do it. I think we need SOB changes, and I definitely think, I think we're all in violent agreement that the current situation between subcaps and supercaps needs to change. so that they are not as effective against each other, and that, exactly as you said, that they're a force multiplier in certain situations, but that they're not an I win button, which they are right now. The Sino changes I thought was gonna make an impact there, and we proved, as Mitten said, it took about half an hour, and we figured out how to get around that. So now it's not. So I think they need to go back to the drawing board, and I hope that they do that.
It's interesting you bring up the real life stuff. I would say to comment on your real life example, one of the issues with trying to look at really complicated systems like a real life government or real life geopolitical situation, or in this case, for a much worse example, Eve, is that we try to draw trends from insufficient information. I mean, the sample size is just not large enough to say anything about what does or doesn't drive conflict in EVE Online in this current meta or any of the previous metas. For instance, I could, if I sat down, theorize a way to invade Delve, but it might take me 5 years and, a group of players that doesn't exist, and, an amount of ISK that doesn't exist, or developing a meta that doesn't exist. I always prefer to kind of work with the meta as it is in the moment. We can talk about what's the perfect game mechanics for the perfect EVE Online in some kind of utopia, but I'd rather just work with what we got and get to a better place quickly. So right now we've got big alliances with supercap umbrellas living in essentially one region, and a bunch of border regions with smaller alliances. How do we get those big alliances fighting again and those small alliances still surviving through the process? And how do we get the fights back into the, back to being daily instead of 2 or 3 times a year in UALX or X47?
I think that there's a couple of different paths to victory there. First of all, I think that having, and it wouldn't necessarily need to be passive moon income or anything like that, but some sort of a treasure chest, a bounty, something that is worth extending your borders for in order to seize that you might not be able to hold, right? Like right now with passive moon, with moon mining the way it is currently, active moon mining, you not only need to hold the space, you need to stay there for a period of time for the frac to hit its max value, and then you need to harvest the field, et cetera, et cetera. We need some sort of a single point conflict driver out there such that you can kill each other. The other thing about it is just like looking at the value proposition for offensive war for an established block. Like, we've got a good setup. It costs so much ISK, effort, and administration to put these citadels down, to put these roots down, that you then go look around and go like, well, technically speaking, like Malpais is a better region than Delve. But how much effort threshold do you need to hit to make it worthwhile for me to say, all right, everybody, uproot all your shit. Malpais is a slightly better region. We're going to move all the way around across the galaxy and start a war and sink trillions of ISK into doing this because it's a tiny benefit. So basically, like, or like, why would we ever attack Legacy, right? Like, you're right next door and stuff like that, and like we can have slap fights over things like that. But like, you don't have any shit that we want. Basically,
that is I mean, Mittens, that's exactly the problem. And I think, to Progod's point, I could come up with a plan. You said you can come up with a plan to go and take Delve away from goons, and it would take 5 years and a group of guys, whatever. But the question is, why? Why would you do that? And if you can't answer why, and if the game is not creating reasons to get an answer to why that makes enough sense that people are willing to commit the time to doing it, then they're just not going to do it, and the result is stalemate. So that question, why do these big guys fight each other, is something that needs to be front of mind for CCP this year, because if they want to get away from this feeling of ennui that has kind of settled over us, other than what we're going to talk about in a minute here with the Northern War, the Impeachment War, we got to answer that question. We got to come up with something that we can provide, and I think it has to be a game mechanic, at least partially a game mechanic, to get people to the point of we want to fight again. So I think that needs to be front and center this year.
I think it's as simple as making passive moon income structures slightly easy to attack, and nerfing Titans and Supers to a point where subcaps can stay within 300 kilometers of them without being instantly murdered. I think that's really all you need. And fighters honestly need to be looked at. But I've seen some ideas that like Team Talos is capable of providing that could get us there. And so I'm pretty optimistic. It's just a matter of, making sure that You know, it's up to Rise and Team Talos and the people who have been working with them so
one of the
far.
things about that, and I don't think this is on Team Talos' radar, and I haven't really heard from any blurfs about this on the meta show or otherwise, because this is something that was sort of like forgotten a few years ago. When they implemented Citadels, it was almost like the fix. Eventually, they were going to have a fix for the shittiest parts of FuzzySoft. They were, the obvious mechanics, testing Citadels as structures, and then getting to a point where you would have a Citadel instead of, an iHub kind of thing. And having that have SOV value, such that instead of needing to fight over FuzzySoft or anything like that, you would then fight over these Citadels that would have iHub upgrades or like a flag upgrade for a Citadel. And it's like CCP is so close to having a working structure system and a working SOV system using Citadels, and I wish they would just give that extra 5% of introducing the Citadel mods to do that, because then we could just dispense with SOV entirely, slap fight over SOV structure Citadels using more refined, more well understood Citadel mechanics. And I think that would open up a lot of options. That plus a single point conflict driver of some sort of passive sense to fight over on borders.
Yep.
I think the issue, like Citadels obviously needs some work, but I think the core issue is just the escalation path is all wonky right now with how strong capitals are. Citadels are strong because you could put carriers on them and have pretty much immunity. And then the carriers could put fighters out there, and there's very little you could do with subcaps to counter fighters unless you bring like 2-to-1 odds and dedicate an entire subcap fleet to nothing but anti-fighter.
Right.
There needs to be something different
there
between supers and carriers. They need to be different ships, right? Because right now,
Right.
like, why would you bring a fucking carrier when you bring a super carrier?
Correct.
That
And
too,
I mean, the other thing
yeah.
with the Citadels, I think, and Progod, your point is valid. There needs to be something that can disrupt the tether mechanic, because you couple that with these big ships, and it's very, very difficult.
The
to
tether
deal with.
mechanic is, so people need to understand something. Pulse has had a similar Pulses used to be all there was, and you could defend Pulses in a similar way by putting your capitals on the edge of Pulse shields, but that had two limitations. One, there's only a limited amount of the Pulse shields are much smaller than a Fortizar tether range is, and you had to sit right on the edge of it. So there was a limited amount of carriers you could put on there, and a very limited amount of Titans and Supers you could do. And if you did put Titans and Supers there, especially under the old Super mechanics where it wasn't so risky to go to 0 kilometers on a Titan, you wouldn't get bosun to death or lance to death. You could bump like Faxes and Titans and Supers back inside the tower, and they wouldn't be able to get back out if you kept bumping them. So it was like not necessarily a great way to defend the pulse. And then of course iHubs had no defensive advantages. So the Citadel tether mechanic, I remember when I was on the CSM and we were talking about new structures, it was pretty much a consensus that the defenders needed some advantage. So I'm okay with Citadels having some advantage, but tether is much stronger than pulse shields ever were. And
Exactly. And there's no counter. I mean, there's literally no counter. You can't.
Really none.
You can't turn it off.
To go at 0.
You can't turn it off. So I think that's something that should potentially be addressed. And I think hopefully we'll start seeing some of these changes. And I'm sure the CSM will have more to say about it when they meet in February.
Well, I'm gonna segue us here, but before I do, I think that one of the best ways for the devs, now that the devs have been allowed to join fleets and join alliances and things like that, I think that one of the best ways for them to get a handle on some of the stuff that they see, player leaders and talking heads, complaining about, is to just get stuck in and join some of these fleets. And there is an active war. Yeah.
I tweeted at devs and DM'd them, and I said, we're going to war. Like when they made the announcement, I'm like, we're going to war next week. I will be fighting against supers with subcaps. There will never be another opportunity, a better opportunity to see what the real issues are, and I haven't gotten one yet.
If we could turn this whole impeachment war thing, because we're sort of partially involved in it, into a opportunity for the devs to like see how this stuff really goes down, I think it would be fantastic. So here's what I want to do. Let us press the button to do the Nullsec Power Hour thing, and then we will dive into, and we'll turn things back over to you once the clip is played of what is this impeachment war thing. Brisk, can you press the button?
Here we go. Nullsec Power Hour. And we're back.
Sweet. All right, so let's start things off here. So last time we did the show, we had Sword Dragon on, and there was this whole big in the chat sort of slap fight of Sword Dragon throwing down the gauntlet, saying, "Bring it," suck my dick, all that other sort of stuff. And Villy and Progod Legend from Legacy in chat basically saying, "All right, so we will." And then, as far as I can tell, they did. So Progod Legend, what's going on? Why did this war start? Why are we calling it, or why are you guys calling it the impeachment war? I saw that on Reddit. What's up?
So yeah, we declared war. I think it was like a week before Christmas on Sword Dragon, and then he came on the meta show and basically threw the gauntlet down. And so we wanted to show that we could, reach out and slap anybody anywhere in Eve on short notice. And so we deployed immediately after the meta show. We deployed ran move ops for the next 3 days after that meta show. And then we RF some stuff on Thursday and killed a fleet while doing it. And then we showed up on that Saturday and won a big fight against GOTG and their allies. And then we took a break for Christmas holidays. Holy shit, Buffalo already scored.
Good.
So I know, right? So we took a break during the holidays, but we definitely wanted to show that we could reach out and punch Short Dragon for talking that shit, and I think we have so far. But and generally we're stationed pure blind right now. We've only brought battle cruisers for the moment. It's a really light deployment. It's far away for us, honestly, and it's it's with Supercap fleets up there in capitals, it'd be tough to deploy all that shit. We're kind of playing it by ear as we go. But yeah, so far we've had some good fights. Initiative, who was helping GOTG, or Dead Coalition, whatever the fuck they call themselves. They were helping GOTG before we got up there. They decided to move right by us with their supers and subcaps. We've had some subcap engagements against them that have gone really well. And they've then dropped their supers and titans, and we disengage and go about our day. We anchored in Asbel. Didn't really build anything with it, but they killed it anyway. And they've got a couple of other of our structures in RF, and we'll see how that goes, I guess.
One of the things I wanted to ask about this, and this is not like you did not do this, so this is not. So going to be asking you questions about something that essentially Villy did, but you are leading the campaign, so this sort of goes to you. The outbreak, all of us here have actually been on the CSM on the show, where we all either very recently or in the last few years or what have you, all CSM types. Sword Dragon, this kicked off because Villy said that Sword Dragon was doing something that was really bad for the game, and that this war was starting because of something that we don't know what it is because it's NDA, something that Sword Dragon did on the CSM, and Villy flipped a table over and said, "We're going to war." And the question I have is this, is that Sword Dragon's been on the CSM for like 4 times now.
Yeah.
Nobody has ever done this.
Well, that's not entirely true.
I mean, he's been on, like, elected twice, and then he's like stealthed into it because of people getting booted off or whatever. My question is basically, do you believe that Sword Dragon needs to go and that this time is different, or are you just sort of like going to war with these guys? Where do you stand on?
Well, so I was saying that's not entirely true when you said that no one's ever raised an issue with Sword Dragon being on a CSM. Plenty of people have raised an issue with Sword Dragon being on a CSM, just not as publicly and with as much clout as Villy can. But if you're in the FC Discord on called No Leaks, which a lot of Nullsec FCs are in, then you're aware of some of the Sword Dragon shenanigans he's done with the CSM. He used to try to hold FC town halls, and they always devolved into fucking shit shows where he'd start muting people and talking over people and stuff like that. So
you served with him, didn't you?
I was on his first CSM. His my second CSM was his, or was it my first one too?
And you're not under NDA anymore, so can you talk about what it was like?
NDA,
Are you still under NDA?
Yeah,
all right, I thought you were past. I thought you had your 5 years up. So
yeah, well, my first term's passed, second term's not. But he didn't go to either of the summits he called in, and he wasn't necessarily super active back then. But he has been on 4 or 5 years, and I will say that sometimes the CSM isn't very effective, and it doesn't really matter who's on the CSM, so you may not notice when there's bad CSMs on there. And there was a period there during a couple of Sword Dragons terms where the CSM was kind of had some issues and was distrusted by CCP. There was some drama that went on, and I don't think it really mattered who was there. But this year has been different. Team Talos being involved, the CSM has been extremely important this year. We had the whole Chaos era fiasco that went on, and the CSM was pretty, from what I understand, was pretty consequential in getting them to realize the mistakes in that and to walk those back. And then out of the Chaos era, or basically the fallout from the Chaos era, Team Talos was created. And now Team Talos is putting out good changes, and from what I understand, the CSM's pretty heavily involved in that too. So this may be one of the most important CSMs we've had since Matani, the one you were on with the monocle gate shit. I can't remember which one. Yeah,
the Incarnate Crisis.
Yeah, so this might be one of the first most important CSMs we've had in a decade. And from what I can tell, without breaking NDA, well, they didn't break NDA when they told me, but things were going extremely well. And then here comes Sword Dragon, who's a 4 or 5 term veteran, and a lot of people know Sword Dragon and know that he has a tendency to be a little bit of a dick and have a little bit of an ego and throw his weight around, or try to throw his weight around. And so he comes into the CSM halfway through the term, and that CSM's already working with CCP really well, and he starts trying to do shit like that. And I don't know exactly what happened. I know that Philly was in a meeting, and then he came out of it and said, "Fuck Sword Dragon. We got to do something about this. I want to go to war with them. I'm posting on Reddit." That's how it happened. This is not like pre-planned or anything. Billy literally just came into HC and said, "That's what we're gonna do." And I said, "Fuck it, let's do it."
So Tony, you serve with Sword. What's your take on him? Do you think he is bad for the game, like Billy seems to think?
I mean, I don't know, to be honest with you. I mean, I think it would be pretty terrible for me to state one thing or the other in general. I mean, we were on the same CSM Brisk, so, you've worked with Sword Dragon as well.
I mean, I can give my opinion, but I just thought I would give you a chance to talk, that's all.
I mean, it can get really emotional at times, but it comes from a good place, I think, so.
Yeah, and I had said this before when this first thing went down. I thought, at least in my experience, last CSM, I thought Sort was one of the better folks on there, and at the very least, he was active and he participated, and you could tell he cared and he showed up, which I can say was something most people did, but not everybody. So that,
I'm sorry, but that's not good enough. I mean, active and participated, anyone can do that. Like, it sucks that at one point. Well, you're right. Not everyone does that, and it sucks that the bar is that low. But I mean, that doesn't mean that we should, be satisfied that some, person who has questionable knowledge about the game and questionable mechanics, or questionable knowledge about mechanics, just because they're active should be, a CSM member, or should be.
He's the best Timezone tanker in the game, though, Progod.
Right. So, all right. So let me be clear then. So you're essentially arguing that what we all thought potentially was a pretext, that Billy just wanted to go kick Sort's teeth in for whatever reason. You guys are honestly you're committed to taking these guys down so that he can't get reelected again. That's what it sounds like you're saying. Am I wrong?
We don't make idle bluffs, or when we say something, we mean it.
So here's a question. If like one of the challenges here, because there's an NDA involved, and I wasn't sure which way you were going to go on this. I wasn't sure whether you're going to basically back Billy's play and say, yeah, Sword Dragon is awful and he needs to go because the CSM is at an important place, and whatever. This is the first time in my memory that there has been a war declared for undisclosed NDA reasons, right? Something happened in a CSM backroom. Villy said, "Fuck Sword Dragon, we're going to war." And essentially, nobody is aware of what Sword Dragon
idle threats.
did
Holy shit.
or said. Yeah, not idle bluffs, idle threats. But that's basically the question is like, okay, so if Sword Dragon is bad, why should, like, you know, is there a cause of action? You know, what's the harms? What are we supposed to be mad about Sword Dragon? If you and Villy are saying that he's got to go for reasons, what do we got? What are we supposed to be mad about at Sword Dragon, I guess, is the question. Everybody who's not involved in the war, a CSM member says Sword Dragon is awful, he's got to go. You are backing
Well,
him
I
up.
think you should be
Why
mad
are
because
the
we all
rest
love
of
this
us-
game. We
Right.
all love Evil
But
Line,
what
and
is
more
Sword Dragon
importantly,
doing that we are supposed to be mad about is my question. Like, what has Sword done that you guys can tell us that he's done that sucks so much that he needs a war named after getting rid of him?
I don't know if NDA you can say specifically what he did in meeting. What I could say is that the direction that the game has been going since this CSM has gotten involved, and since Team Talos has been announced, and since the Chaos era is over, has been nothing but positive. There's been plenty of stories about how the health of the game is going in the right direction. What did we hit? 32,000 people today online? Was that the number we were talking about before the
Yeah,
show?
I think almost 33, maybe even north of
Yeah,
that
I
now.
mean,
So
it's
things are
an
going-
incredible direction to go for the game, and all of the stuff that's been happening has been before Sword Dragon really got back on the CSM. He only got back on, you know, recently, and it's really been the original people who were elected to the CSM who have been driving this. So, you know, I would say that if you want to make sure that the game keeps going this way, or if you're worried about the health of the game, then you definitely want to do everything you can to try to preserve that. And if people who have been making a good effort to improve the health of the game say that there's someone who is, you know, not basically on board with the direction this needs to go, and who is doing things that are detrimental to the game, then that is something to be worried about. That is what we're here for.
That's a really good point. I agree with you completely. If people who have been elected to the CSM and have been there for the full term are saying that this guy is a problem and something needs to be done, that is something that we as players absolutely should pay attention to. So my question for you then is, what does this say about the fact that none of the other CSMs on Sword or Villy's term have backed up what Villy has said? It is only Villy saying Sword Dragon sucks, and zero of the other CSMs.
I'd say I've been in this
agreeing with that.
situation. I've been in this situation before. So you'll remember your number 2 in command, Cyan Kunitomo, was on the CSM during my second term. And I don't know how much he divulged to you, but he caused a massive amount of internal drama on a CSM, so much so that CCP banned him from running for the next CSM because of it. So
That's not
generally
at
in this
all what
situation,
happened,
when a
actually,
CSM
but
causes a lot of internal drama, the other CSMs try to stay out.
I'm going to go ahead and stop you right there, because going after Scion over something that was an issue with both Falcon and Lilu, which is something that was extensively blogged about by Sugar Kyle, which is something, there's an entire fascinating blog series that she wrote for anyone who's interested in the truth of what happened. She's a cop in DC, and I would never ever want to piss her off or mess with her.
I remember Sugar. She's a good girl.
Yeah, you don't fuck with her. And there was a whole lot of drama there, but I will absolutely set a hard boundary there. No, like, that was not, oh my God, the whole no scions rule, all that drama is something that is not his fault and is not an accurate representation of what went down. But I do think so actually very effective deflection, because now I'm off defending Scion. Let's move things back to none of the other, you know, Villy has made a public statement that Sword Dragon's got to go. You have backed that statement here on the show instead of saying, you know, it's between Villy and Sword. So then this begs the question of, where are the other CSMs behind this? If Sword Dragon has done something that is so dangerous for the game that we are naming a war the Impeachment War and going hard at him and herfing all these blurfs, where's the bloody shirt? And where are the other people that are just as angry at Sword Dragon and Villy? Like, why aren't my guys telling me to go attack Sword Dragon?
Well, once again, there's often CSM drama, and I know quite a few CSMs who were very pissed off that Goon CSMs were using the CSM to basically metagame the judge into disbanding CO2. They felt like that was an inappropriate use of what is supposed to be a overall, you know, general, everyone's there to help the game.
We were helping the
so
judge
when drama like this happens, generally they don't come out and publicly do it. And the fact that Vili has is unprecedented, but I don't think the other CSMs feel like they need to come out and publicly back it. What's said has been said. The war is already happening. If we win, then he'll have his voting block removed, and maybe he won't get elected.
Well, now that's what I wanted to ask you. So now, granted, before I get to that question, I will just say, in Vili's defense and in the defense of Sort as well, given what happened to me, I doubt very sincerely that any of these guys are going to want to talk about anything that happened around the table in any even oblique way, because the last thing they want to do is potentially put themselves in a position where they're going to get accused of violating the NDA and kicked off. And I think that's probably more than anything the reason why they're being quiet about it. But even behind
I can tell
the
you there are
scenes,
CSMs who agree with them, but yeah, I don't think they're any interested to cause any more drama than has already been caused, because CCP's not going to remove Sort Dragon from the CSM just because Vili and others think so. I mean, maybe if they had a unanimous vote, but I'm not sure if it'd be unanimous. And there's really no precedent for that. I don't think the CSM has ever voted to remove anybody, despite there being clear cause in quite a few occasions. So, if it's not going to result in a removal, then what's said has been, what's needed to be said has been said. The war is happening, and the results will hopefully, show up in the next election.
Now that's the question I wanted to ask you. So this is probably one of the first times, at least I can think of, where the result of the war or a victory condition for the war is something that has nothing to do with in-game mechanics. So is the only way you guys win this war if Sort doesn't get reelected? Is that the only victory condition, or what are you guys intending to? I mean, does it have to be the destruction of Deadco? Is it just Sort not winning? I mean, if he doesn't run again, is that a victory?
Technically, our goal is to remove his voting block, and if he runs for CSM next year and there's just a bunch of fuck test votes that elect him anyway, then I guess that's that. That would be. I mean, it'd be hard for us to say that's not at least somewhat of a failure, even if we remove his voting block, he gets elected anyway. But at that point, we've done all we could. We're just trying to do what's best for the game that we love. We all like to play Eve. I keep trying to play other shitty games, and they all suck, and I keep coming back to Eve. So at the end of the day, we're going to do everything we can to try to make the game a better place. And if he ends up getting reelected anyway because there's some fuck test votes out there, then so be it.
I mean, if I wanted to destroy, not that we have used the CSM in a metagaming way to recruit the second in commands of our foes and then slit their throats in the middle of the night or anything like that in the game, using the judge as an example, when we're up to stuff, usually you do it, in a deniable way. So like if I wanted to remove Sword Dragon or anybody's voting block because of something that happened on the CSM that I was unhappy with, what I would do is not tell anybody about it, right? Like I would keep the fact that I'm mad about something that they did on the CSM a complete secret from everybody. And then I would enact a campaign to degrade their support, to destroy their alliance, essentially to go to war and, do all the normal EVE Online stuff. But I wouldn't tell them anything about it, because then that would invite opposition. Now everybody knows it's all about Sword Dragon on the CSM and people are paying attention to him. Why don't you just, deploy? Well, I mean, this isn't you. This is Vili started this, so it's not really fair for me to ask you that question. But basically, I think that there is a real risk now of solidifying a voting block around Sword Dragon that wasn't really there before, because he typically only gets onto the CSM as like the first or second alternate, right? Like when somebody sort of drops off. So it's a weird look.
We generally like to keep our diplomacy on the battlefield, in my opinion.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, actually, we are sort of headed towards the end of the show. I want to keep going for a little bit longer, though. And Suitonia's already commented on the CSM thing. Brisk did. I did as well. I think we're good to move to talk about piercing the corporate veil. Brisk, what do you think?
I think we're good to go. Let's hit our last segment real quick, and then we're going to get out of here for today. And as always, the Piercing the Corporate Veil segment is about CCP and the things that they are doing. And I know Matani wanted to talk about some things he wanted to give them credit for.
Yeah, so one of the things that I think is important is when things are going well for CCP or when things are improving, that we are open and optimistic about the stuff that is reasonable and sensible to be positive about. And it is really nice to see the fact that the more and more people are playing the game, the fact that filaments have been implemented. I think I kind of wanted to do this whole rant about filaments, and we kind of went into this at the earlier part of the show because I got so excited about it. One of the biggest challenges that we have across all areas of the game is this sort of sweet spot Goldilocks zone of 5 to 25 man gangs smashing into each other randomly and as easily as possible. And the amount of work that it takes in an era of super cap umbrellas to get 5 to 25 people near some content somewhere in the galaxy. And over the holidays, CCP, I think, just almost by accident said, "Hey, this would be a cool, fun reindeer themed thing to do. You know, here's some filaments. Let's do it." And I personally think that it's one of the best game design additions to EVE Online that I've seen in years, because it fills this niche for essentially almost on-demand content that doesn't get into that territory of fucking things over at a strategic level or making things too easy or anything like that. So it's just been a huge win, unasked for, unknown, just totally thrown in there randomly. And I think that when CCP does something that gets it right, they deserve praise. And high fives all around, guys. I think the filaments are great. I hope that they go in a more permanent way. And I know that in addition to that, there was another thing that Brisk, I don't know, do you want to talk about this or not? But another thing that they did that was quite popular was the year and Eve thing.
Yeah, I think, when it comes down to it, one of the things that we love about EVE is trying to see what impact we have had on the game as a whole. And it's hard to do sometimes because we don't have the data, but CCP has the data. They know how many jumps we take. They know how many things we kill and who we see. I mean, we have some of this data, but we don't have all of it. But by putting the video together and doing it in a way similar to what Facebook does with how many likes you got this year and those types of things, you got a little snapshot of what you've done in EVE, what you succeeded at, who you fought the most, who killed you the most, those types of things. That is a cool thing. I think it brings the community together. It makes people happy. They get to see what they did in the game. And it gives them goals to say, hey, all right, I was 15% this year. I want to get to 10% next year or something like that. So I think those types of videos, especially something that we never even thought was on the radar, was never anything that was talked about with the community. They just kind of came out with it, and they did it right at the end of the year. I think that was cool. I hope that they do more stuff like that, because we have a lot of nerds that love data in this game, and there's a ton of data about what we do. Giving it to us in a visual format that's fun to look at, and you can trade with your friends and show everybody what you did. That's cool. So I was very pleased with that. I hope they do that again.
All right. I don't know if our guests wanted to have any last comments either on cool things that CCP has done right recently or any other issues. We are headed towards the end of our show.
I'd just like to just put out another shout out for Team Talos, because, I think it's great having just some kind of change that, has some game changing effect every 2 weeks it's really good. And I always have something to look forward to.
I agree.
Progod?
Yeah, I mean, I just keep up the good work. I think the big consequential changes are coming up. If they get capitals right and they get citadels right, then man, we might really kick it into gear during the summer, because there's Eve's one of those weird games where it's got such a large community of people who could come back at any time that, I mean, maybe we'll be talking about how there's 40 to 50,000 people online by June or July.
That would be fantastic for everyone.
Yeah.
I just like to say, I want to tell everybody, we've been monitoring and watching what's been going on in Australia with the fires quite a bit. We have a very large Australian community in EVE. We're thinking about you guys. We're hoping that you stay safe. If you can't play the game because you're displaced or you're moving around, we'll be waiting for you when you get back. So be careful out there. And I think that's it.
I'm not sure. Yeah, I wasn't sure. Sorry about that. There was an awkward silence because I wasn't sure whether that was going to be the outro or what have you. But yeah, the Australia thing, I got to say, is just terrifying. Seeing the footage of that, people having to flee into boats. It's this awful, everything is going to sideways sort of nightmare scenario. Yikes. All right. Well, I don't want to be on too much of a downer, but stay safe, and we will see everyone here next week for next week's show, where I believe we're going to have as guests. Actually, I'm not going to speak about that if we haven't confirmed them. So
Not confirmed
we'll,
yet. We're working on guests for next week. But thanks again, everybody, for being here for the first episode of the 2020 season. And you stay classy, New Week.